Welcome to the Survivor's Chair podcast, a podcast where we break down our stories and our trauma, understanding how they have impacted our career and our life. This is a place where we break free from shame, own our truth, and step into our power, one story at a time. Hi, I'm Kim, an adoptee, a former foster youth, hairstylist, salon owner, breast cancer, and complex trauma survivor. So join us, pull up a chair, in this no sugarcoating, no holding back, honest conversation about healing and success. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Survivor's Chair podcast. I am your host, Kim Russell, and today we are going to talk about emotional awareness. I know that I've mentioned it a little bit before in a few different podcasts, but we're going to kind of dive into it today, and we're going to talk about what it means and how that impacts our life. So if you've been listening, you'll know that I say all the time that awareness is 90% of the solution, and the other 10% is doing the hard work and doing the work on yourself. You have to work on yourself, growing and changing, evolving. That's part of the human experience. We're not meant to stay stuck in one place our entire lives. This life, these lessons, it's about you. It's not about anybody else. It's not about mimicking someone else, repeating what somebody else says or what somebody else does. This is about your healing, your body, your mind, nobody else's. It's individual for everybody. It's not the same for any two people, which is why we all need different things to help us and guide us in our own process. Emotional awareness is what we need to really live our life to the fullest, whatever that means for you. It's different for everybody. Happiness is nothing but an inside job. It's not an outside job. Things, stuff, things you acquire, things you buy, that's not happiness. Happiness starts on the inside and works its way out. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. How many times have you said, so-and-so made me feel XYZ? And when you get down to it, nobody has the power to make you feel anything. You are the person that has the power over all of it. We're so used to our trauma and our past experiences that give us the feeling that we have in the moment. So, like for an example, like when you feel guilty, I feel so guilty. I should have done this. I didn't do this. I'm guilty, guilty, guilty. It's tied into a lot of things, but a lot of times it's shame. Who wants to talk about shame? Nobody wants to talk about shame. And trauma is directly correlated with shame. Like we feel shame about who we are. We feel shame about, not being lovable, not being wanted, not being worthy. There's shame attached to all of it. But who wants to talk about that? You'd much rather say, "Oh, I just feel guilty." Or you can get angry like I did, and I'll talk about that. When our shame shows up, it shows up like, "Oh, we're the ones that did like a bad thing." So when it goes back to our trauma, especially childhood trauma, which I talk about a lot, like for me, the abandonment piece, I have shame around not being lovable, not being wanted. So who wants to talk about that? We're going to talk about something else, right? But being emotionally aware is understanding that when you say things like, I feel guilty, you can say, all right, where is this really coming from? What is this really about? It could be one of those things that I've talked about a million times, like fear of saying no because they won't like me. They'll reject me, or I'll look selfish. I'll be selfish. So we people please, we take the abuse, we walk on eggshells, all of the things. So we don't have to feel the big stuff or be aware or emotionally aware of the big stuff. And it's amazing how it's just all tied together. We can talk about all these things separately, emotional awareness, fear, trauma. I mean, it's one big loop. That's all it is. It's a big loop that we go around until we decide to jump off. We're caught in this loop, and all we're doing is deflecting everything to the outside world. We're not in our bodies. We're not feeling our bodies. We're just deflecting, deflecting, deflecting. So, what is the definition of emotional awareness and having emotional awareness? It's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage and express emotions, your own and others. Your ability to recognize other people's emotions and the ability to recognize that other people's emotions are not yours. I have this thought, this theory, whatever you want to call it, now that I'm older. And before, I would get so upset if I thought somebody was mad at me. If somebody was in a bad mood and I was like, oh my gosh, they're mad at me. What did I do wrong? And I would continuously play that in my head. What did I do? What did I do? How can I fix it? And, I'd be like, are you okay? What can I do? I'll make you dinner. What's going to make you happy? And now I live a life of, if you're in a bad mood, that's fine. If you're mad at me, then tell me. If you don't tell me that you're mad at me, then I'm assuming you're not, and I'm going about my life and I'm not paying any attention to it. If you're acting out, like slamming the door, stomping, giving me the silent treatment because you are mad, but you haven't said anything, I'm still going to assume that you're not mad at me. And I'm going to go about my day and have a great day. Where before, that would send me spinning and like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? How can I fix this? So recognizing that somebody else's emotions are not yours, and they're not yours to fix, they're not yours to tend to. You need to pay attention to your emotions, what's happening, what they really mean, what's under the surface. Some examples that I have about when you're feeling that emotional unawareness is, like your child is mom, 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 and you just turn around and you snap at them because you're stressed out and you don't even realize you're stressed out. So instead of taking a breath, taking a minute and being like, okay, let me just take a minute and respond to this in the right way. One of the things that emotional unawareness is, you're constantly overreacting to things that you shouldn't overreact to. We've all been there, right? I mean, I'm not the only one that has overreacted about, I don't know, spilling a glass of water. And for some reason that sends you over the edge, but it has absolutely nothing to do with that. You're actually in the process of losing somebody you love or your job or something, something like that. Sometimes we can shut down our emotions. We've talked about that. That's emotional unawareness. And the same thing is deflecting blame on others. I have a section in my book that's called The Blame Game, something that I played for a good portion of my life. Taking responsibility for our emotions, because our emotions are just a reflection of ourselves. It's going within ourselves, not outside. The emotions, the reactions, everything is happening inside of us, even though it's probably contradicting what you're feeling. Most people are like, no, 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 that person did this and that person did this. Some of the questions you can ask yourself, like you really have to dig deep, is what is the emotion really about? Like what was the true emotion I was having? What it was the true emotion behind the anger I had when I spilled the water? It was the grief of losing somebody. Really digging deep and getting to that core of what that emotion is. It's the same as listening to your body, because most of us are going to have a body reaction for an emotion. And that body reaction is usually something pretty old. So it's connecting all the dots, learning how to calm your body, the nervous system, and getting to that real raw emotion underneath it. I'm going to give you a little life experience story here, where anger was really a cover up for me for sadness my entire life. I would avoid feeling sad or crying at any length, and it came out as anger. And if I let go of that anger, the tears would automatically start. Much later, mind you, because I did not cry ever. Never, ever, ever did I cry. And when I did cry, my mother's reaction was to laugh at me. So it didn't feel safe to cry. So I kept that in because that meant I was weak or I was less than. Also, so much of this stuff depends how we grow up too, and what traumas we went through, what ages, all the things. But the other thing that my mother did is she used her crying as a tool. And she would say things like, "Look what you did. Now I'm crying." Like it was my responsibility that she was crying. I also heard, like the rest of us that are like 50 some odd years old, if you don't knock it off, I'm going to give you something to cry about. I had this moment, I don't know, 15, 16, I don't know, but let's go back to any 15, 16-year-old. I was mouthy. I was tough, all of the things. Little did I know, but my father had gotten laid off that day. And I was being kind of a typical teenager pain in the ass to my mother. And she called my father in the room, like, take care of her and get me to shut up. This was his emotional unawareness to the fact that he was having emotions around being laid off and probably fear of money and fear of all of those things. He snapped at me and threw me against the wall. And he kept saying to me, "Cry, damn it, cry." And I don't know why that was so important to him. Maybe that would have showed him that I cared in some way. I don't know. But when I tell you, there was no way I was going to cry. No way I was going to let either one of them see me cry. I was not, in my 15, 16-year-old brain, going to give them the power over me, for them to say that I was weak or to laugh at me. I felt like I would lose my strength, and that would be a way for them to hurt me. I felt like if I did, then that would make me vulnerable, which would then put me in a position where people could hurt me emotionally, physically, whatever it was. So I had to be tough as nails. And let me tell you, I would hold that emotion and those tears in until it freaking hurt. I would have like a cantaloupe sized ball in my throat that it wouldn't even allow me to swallow. It was so big. And to me, the emotions were so big. That's what that was too. And there was no way I was going to let them out. No way. So instead, I just got angry. I got angry. I yelled. I stomped. I got quiet. I slammed doors. I gave them the cold shoulder until I felt somewhat safe again. Not that I ever felt safe, which was why it was really hard to be emotionally aware, because I just couldn't recognize what was safe and what was unsafe. That was my survival. That's what I was doing. It's crazy, I know. There's a lot of us out there that have been taught that our emotions are bad or irrational. And I don't know as if I was taught that, but I was taught that I should keep them to myself. So I went to the absolute extreme of that because I had my own stuff mixed in with that, the fear of, losing control and, somebody hurting me and all that. There's a lot of people around us that tell us that we're crazy, that tell us that we're overreacting. They tell us that it's our imagination. And, most people are looking through their life through a window, shall we say. And they're talking about what they think other people are doing wrong, or they're talking about how they should live their life. We've all been guilty of that. I've been guilty of that because it's so much easier to deflect onto somebody else. And then if you get two people together who are deflecting and they're like, yeah, look at them, look at their life. That's ridiculous. What are they doing that for? They should be living their life like me. Please. The truth is, when you don't know what you were feeling or where it's coming from or how it's showing up in your body, you're more likely to hurt somebody else, to like lashing out at them or judging them or whatever. Something I used to say when I was younger, which this is not advice by any means because this is not normal. I used to say, don't hurt me because I'm better at it than you are. And if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you 100 times more than you'll ever hurt me. And I could, and I did. If I got hurt, my level of I'm going to hurt you back went through the roof. When I felt threatened or judged or questioned, challenged, called out, disappointed, abandoned, rejected, I mean, you name it, I would give it back 100 times worse. It's not something that I'm proud of, but we're here to be honest, right? As the intro says, I am not here to sugarcoat anything or pretend that I am sitting here like the perfect human being and I got it all right and I'm here to tell you what to do to make it all right too. Oh no, 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 no. And I still can get caught up in these silly little things when I get hurt. Emotional awareness though is being able to stop, take a minute, take a step back and be like, all right, is this rational? Where is this really coming from? Am I feeling abandoned right now? I am. That's what it's really about. This was just another way for me to protect myself from the hurt. Like how many times have we said to someone or said that someone made them feel like a piece of shit? Oh my God, that whoever, Sally, sorry if there's Sallys out there, that Sally made me feel like a piece of shit. And that's not possible. It's just not possible. That's not what I believe. Not that I haven't said that myself, but it's only possible because we already feel like a piece of shit. That's the problem. So nobody can make us feel anything. I'm going to say that again. Nobody can make us feel anything. We are responsible for our feelings. They are responsible for their feelings. Emotional awareness is like digging in and asking yourself why you feel like a piece of shit. Where does it come from? How did it start? When did it start? That's reflection. That's awareness. You're not always going to get it right. You're not always going to have the answers. You're not always going to be able to figure it out. And that's because we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. We're not meant to be perfect because we're meant to learn and grow and evolve, just like I said. And once you become a little bit emotionally aware and then you grow from that, you'll find that you don't have to defend yourself against people. Like if somebody said something that would have in the past made you quote unquote feel like a piece of shit, and it doesn't even phase you anymore. Somebody says something and you get that pang of shame or that guilt that comes up. You can sit with it and you can feel it and you can feel where it is in your body. You know it, you name it, you recognize it and where it comes from, and then you move through it. You know that it's a byproduct of your life experiences. I'll say it over and over again. Healing requires feeling. You can't have emotional awareness without it. It's not possible. This isn't about always being calm and centered and zen and that's not reality either. It's not letting your emotions control you. It's about not stuffing them down. It's not about pretending that they're not there because that is when the body experience takes over. That's where the stomach issues come in. That's where the headache comes in. That's where the pain comes in. That stuffing of the emotions, it's stored, it's kept, they're there. It's like a bubbling volcano ready to come out. Emotional awareness is about creating space between the emotion and the reaction. It's about not yelling and screaming when you're frustrated. It's about taking a breath and saying, I need a minute. I need a minute. I'll come back to you. It's not about shutting down. Instead, it's telling somebody, you know what? I'm actually feeling really overwhelmed, and I'm going to come back to that when I have more of a capacity and understanding or more space to talk about it. As trauma survivors, like a lot of us are, we were taught to overreact. Maybe we had to do that to be heard or to be seen, or we were taught to numb out because that's how we stayed safe. We knew it wasn't safe to have our emotions. Maybe if you had your emotions, you were going to get smacked. In the 70s, we had all the things. We had the wooden spoons, the giant wooden spoons and forks. And please message me if you remember those. I think the worst weapon, I'll call it, that my parents had was, if you remember the paddle with an elastic band, the wooden paddle with the elastic band with the red ball. And we just would ping pong it all around the house. When that elastic broke, and that ball wasn't attached to it anymore, that paddle became the weapon. And when we did something wrong, that paddle came out, the belt came out, the giant fork and knife came out. No, it was not normal. No, it was not good. But maybe you're taught to not have your emotions, because if you did, something bad's going to happen. That's what we associate with. So, emotional awareness also gives us the empathy to allow us to hold space for others when they have big feelings or emotions without taking them on. You notice people when they feel angry or sadness or discomfort or whatever. You can respond with compassion without absorbing it. That was something I had to do as a hairdresser. I had to learn how to do that because one person would come in and they'd had the happiest day of their life. They had the birth of their child when the next person came in and they had a terminal diagnosis. The next person came in and they got engaged. The next person came in and they just lost their spouse. So I had to not take on other people's stuff. I learned how to be with them when they were feeling these things, but I did not take it on. I wasn't the stylist that went home and thought about one person all night long and consumed my thoughts. When you learn to have empathy for others and to be there when they have big emotions and not take it on, that requires boundaries. You can't let somebody hijack your life or your emotions. And the other thing, when you have emotional awareness, which, this is something that I feel is so freaking important, and so many people lack it. And that is listening. You listen better when you have emotional awareness because you're not sitting there hyper focused on how somebody is making you feel, even though it's not possible. You're removed from their emotions. You're not taking it on. And you're not sitting there thinking about what you're going to say to them about your own experience, or you can truly, truly sit and listen and be with the person. It's so important. When we listen, we learn. Most people aren't great listeners. They just want to talk about themselves and their own stuff. When you can have that conversation with somebody who equally listens and talks, it's like magic. It's magic. Most of us have that one person in their life that never listens or doesn't want to know anything about you. Maybe, big maybe, they ask you how you are. And when you try to answer them, they interrupt. And then ultimately, you never answer it. They're so wrapped up in talking that they have forgotten how to listen. Listening is an art. And I'm going to challenge everybody today, the day that you're listening to this podcast, to pay attention to yourself. Have some emotional awareness around your listening and focus on, if you are busy with your thoughts while somebody is talking because you're thinking about what you're going to say and you're not listening to what they say, are you interrupting them? Are you talking over them? I'm going to be honest because again, this is not a sugarcoating podcast. I can be an interrupter for sure. And it's something I still work on and something that I recognize when I'm doing it. And I'm such an interrupter. And again, we're not perfect. So we're learning. That's all, we're learning. So the other thing that emotional awareness allows us to do is we can handle conflict without yelling and screaming. We can actually be calm and talk truthfully and honestly about how we feel. Now, of course, this does depend on who you're having conflict with. And if you're having conflict with somebody who is not emotionally aware or working on it, that is very challenging because then it can turn into a one-sided screaming match. And, that's when you have to say to yourself, you know what? Or you say to them, I'm actually not going to do this. And you won't leave that situation feeling, oh my God, I gotta talk to him. You won't feel like that. You'll feel more like, well, we'll come back to that when we can. If you can. Sometimes you can't. It does allow us to feel confident in speaking up. You're not as I was guilty of, especially in my early relationships, being awful because they were hurting me. So I was going to hurt them 100 times more, as I already covered. I don't want to do that anymore. Does it slip in sometimes? It does. It does. Again, no sugarcoating. Most of us have been taught that conflict equals danger. So communicating can feel threatening, and we have to learn how to be in a relationship in a safe way. I'm going to speak for myself that just never have felt 100% safe. And what happens with emotional unawareness, even if we're trying to be emotionally aware, we tend to react to a situation based on an old wound or an old, I kind of don't even really like that word, but an old emotion that we have stored and trapped in our body, because that's what we know. And unfortunately, we bring it into our now life where it doesn't belong anymore. So that's why we have to figure out how to not let it bring us back to where we were when we were 4, or whatever it was, how you felt at that time in your life, how you reacted when you were 4. You don't want to react that way when you're 54, but it happens because that's what our body knows. That's what our mind knows. That's what our nervous system knows. Most of us weren't given the space or the safety to feel. As I say all the time, healing is feeling. Like, we can't heal or grow and get better and evolve without feeling. It does not work that way. If we can stop focusing on the outside world and focus on ourselves, that is awareness. So, how do we become more emotionally aware? What can we do? And first thing first is stop looking out the window and start looking in the mirror. I know looking at ourselves from the inside is scary. I know that, because it requires us to be honest with ourselves about what we're feeling and why. And like I said before, like, who really wants to feel the shame? Nobody wants to feel the shame. But once you feel the shame, you understand the shame, you know it's there, why it's there, you know it's not your fault, and then you move through it. It's not so bad and when it comes up again. What I don't want you to do is confuse this with everything being your fault. Like, I don't want you to walk away from this and always being like, I'm sorry, this is my fault because this is my da 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 da. Because that is not what this is about. It's about having a responsibility to understand your reactions and why they are there and what's happening that triggered that reaction. It's not about taking responsibility for everything that happens in your life either. The more emotionally aware that you become, you slowly gain control and power over your life by not trying to control what other people are doing and saying. Like I said, ultimately everything comes down to us. Everything. And I know that sounds crazy because you want to say that, Auntie Sally did whatever to me when I was 4 and it's her fault. And at some point, you have to feel those feelings and feel those triggers and move through them. Triggers are very important. And I hear people say a lot, like, triggers. Oh, no, I can't be around that person. They trigger me. I can't be around this. It triggers me. I can't do this because it triggers me. I see a trigger as something that needs to be worked on, something that still needs to be healed, something that still needs to come out. That's what I see a trigger as. So when something so-called triggers me or triggers a response in my body, I say to myself, all right, what is there that I still need to work on? Which, as I will say, our working on is never ending. I don't care how you grew up in your life. I don't care if you had trauma or you didn't have trauma. It's so important to keep evolving and keep learning and keep knowing more about yourself. I think that makes us a better person out in the world. And on that note, my friends, I'm going to say that's it. And thank you for being here. I will ask you to, comment, review, give the podcast 5 stars, because it really helps get the podcast out to other people, which, my whole goal is to, if somebody takes one snippet of information from anything I say or have learned, other guests on here, help somebody learn that one little iota of something, then all of this is worth it. This podcast is growing every day, which is really exciting. So I'm just excited to be here, and I'm so grateful for your support and for listening, your feedback. I love the messages. My last guest, Melissa Gilbo from Women's Business League, which we had such a great last episode, and she's getting a ton of messages. And, it just fills my heart. So thank you for being here, and I will see you next time in the Survivor's Chair. Thank you for tuning into the Survivor's Chair podcast. You can head over to my website, www.kimrussellpro.com. That's KIMRUSSELLPRO.com. You can catch up on my blogs. Follow me on social, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or TikTok. All the links will be in the show notes, and I'll see you next time in the Survivor's Chair.